Christmas morning was supposed to be peaceful. Snow lightly dusted the lake, my kids were laughing by the shore, and the smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air. But then it happened. HOA Karen, the woman everyone whispered about in the neighborhood, stormed up to our property with a wild look in her eyes and a gun in her hand. She had no idea who she was dealing with. My heart stopped. My family froze. I could see the fear in my spouse's eyes, the confusion in my children's. And then a thought hit me. She didn't know that I owned the entire lake. Every inch of this so-called neighborhood territory belonged to me. The power was in my hands, but the moment demanded calm and a plan. Before we dive into the full story, I have to ask, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe for the full shocking story. All right, before I get into every shocking detail, let me set the stage. This wasn't just any Christmas morning, it was the kind of serene, picture-perfect holiday that most people dream about. My family and I had just woken up to the soft glow of the sunrise reflecting off the lake, steam rising from mugs of hot chocolate in our hands. Everything felt calm, safe, until it wasn't. You see, our neighborhood wasn't exactly known for its peace. There was one particular neighbor who everyone called HOA Karen. She wasn't just strict about the rules. She thrived on control, on making everyone feel small, like she owned the place. And honestly, I dealt with her petty threats and disputes before. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that morning. Karen wasn't just coming to complain. She came with aggression, with anger that had been simmering for months. And she didn't just yell. She pulled a gun. Right there on Christmas, in front of my family. The fear I felt in that moment was like a frozen weight pressing down on me, a moment that could have ended in disaster. But here's the twist. She had no idea who she was actually confronting. She had no clue that I didn't just live by this lake. I own the entire lake. Every inch, every shoreline, every drop of water. And that knowledge changed everything. Now, before I take you deeper into this unbelievable story, I need to know, where are you watching this from? Comment your city down below, and make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single shocking moment of this story. Christmas morning had always been my favorite time of the year. There was something magical about the way the lake reflected the early sunlight, how the frost on the trees glittered like diamonds, and how my family's laughter echoed across the water. I had spent years making this place a sanctuary, a place where my kids could grow up without fear, and where my spouse and I could finally relax after the chaos of daily life. That morning, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in months. I watched my kids toss snowballs at each other, their cheeks pink with excitement, and my spouse handed me a steaming cup of coffee. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. The first sign that something was wrong came when I noticed movement at the edge of our property. Normally, the cul-de-sac was quiet this time of morning. But there she was, Karen. HOA Karen, with her signature furrowed brow, tightly pressed lips, and a gaze that could make anyone feel guilty for simply existing. I had dealt with her before. Minor disputes about lawn maintenance, complaints about dock placement, endless letters about property boundaries. She thrived on conflict, and most neighbors had learned to avoid her entirely. But this time it was different. She wasn't just walking onto our property with her usual haughty attitude. She was storming across the snow, clutching something in her hand. At first, I thought it was a cell phone or a clipboard, but as she got closer, I realized my heart was about to stop. She was holding a gun. A real gun. And her eyes weren't just angry, they were wild, unhinged. Time slowed. I froze. My spouse noticed immediately, the coffee mug trembling in their hands. My kids stopped mid-laugh, confusion and fear written across their faces. I could feel the tension radiating off Karen like a storm ready to break. In that moment, every instinct screamed at me to protect my family, but I also knew that panic could be dangerous. One wrong move, one sudden gesture, and everything could spiral into disaster. I had dealt with aggressive neighbors before, but nothing like this. Nothing close. Then she started yelling, words that barely registered because All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. "You think you can just do whatever you want," she screamed. "This is our neighborhood. You don't own everything." Her voice cracked with rage, her finger twitching near the trigger. That's when it hit me. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea. Not about me, not about the property, not about the fact that I legally own the entire lake. Every shoreline, every dock, every stretch of water, it was mine. And with that ownership came rights, authority, and control she could never imagine. I took a slow breath. My hands stayed calm, even though my heart was racing. I had to think, to calculate. Reacting with anger would only escalate things. I needed her to realize, without letting fear take over completely, that she was in no position to threaten me or my family. "Karen," I said, evenly, stepping forward just enough to show I wasn't running, but not enough to provoke her, "you need to put the gun down. Right now." Her eyes widened for a split second, and I saw hesitation flicker across her face. She had expected compliance, fear, maybe even a fight, but she hadn't expected this. She didn't know the full scope of what she was challenging. You don't get it," she stammered, her voice rising again. "This neighborhood, these rules, they apply to everyone." I shook my head slowly. "You don't understand. This isn't just my property. I own the entire lake. Every inch of it. And you're standing on it illegally with a loaded weapon in your hand." The effect was immediate. Her anger faltered, confusion replacing it just for a moment. I could see the gears turning in her mind as she tried to reconcile the image of a harmless neighbor she had always hated with the reality of someone who wielded enormous power over the land she had always tried to control. But the danger wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down gracefully. Her face twisted with frustration, and she raised the gun higher as if daring me to act. My kids were watching now, wide-eyed, frozen in fear. My spouse's hand found mine, gripping tightly, a silent plea for safety and calm. I knew I had only seconds to act. I had spent years preparing for worst-case scenarios on this property, security systems, hidden paths, escape routes, but this was different. This wasn't a burglary or a random threat. This was personal, and it was Christmas. I spoke again, my voice low, steady, and commanding. "Karen, listen to me. You are threatening my family. You are on property you do not own. One more step, and the law will be involved immediately. Put the gun down before this escalates any further." Her hands shook, the gun wavering. And then, in a sudden and shocking twist, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just angry at me. She was scared, terrified. Not because of the law, not because of the lake, but because she realized, deep down, that she had underestimated me. That realization made her hesitate long enough for me to calmly, but firmly take control of the situation. I kept my voice steady. "Karen, this ends now. Leave my family alone, or I will call the authorities. You are standing on a lake that belongs to me, not your HOA rules. One more step and you'll regret it." She glared at me, caught between fury and fear. Finally, with a reluctant, trembling hand, she lowered the gun. Slowly. Her breathing was heavy, uneven. I didn't move, didn't relax. Not yet. I waited, eyes locked, until she finally turned and fled across the snow, muttering curses under her breath. The tension didn't leave immediately. My family clung to me, trembling, silent. My kids had never seen fear like that in my eyes, or theirs. My spouse shook their head in disbelief. I realized that this Christmas had become a turning point, not just for Karen, but for all of us. That morning, I understood the full weight of owning the lake, not just its beauty and freedom, but its power, its ability to protect. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't the last we'd see of Karen. After Karen fled, the snow seemed to fall heavier, each flake a reminder of how close we had come to disaster. My hands were still shaking, even though I tried to calm myself for the sake of my family. My kids clung to my legs, their wide eyes silently asking if everything was okay. I swallowed, forcing a steady breath, and tried to project calm. My spouse rubbed my back and whispered, "We're okay, but what just happened?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, what had just happened wasn't just a confrontation, it was a warning. Karen wasn't someone who lost control easily. The rage I had seen in her eyes, combined with the fear of being confronted by me, was a dangerous mix. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That afternoon, I walked along the shoreline, letting the cold air bite at my face. The lake stretched endlessly before me, smooth and silent, reflecting the winter sky like a giant frozen mirror. Owning this lake had always been a privilege, a secret power that most neighbors envied but few understood. Here, I could control everything from who docked boats to who fished or swam, but with that ownership came responsibility. And now, more than ever, it felt like a heavy burden. I fought back to the confrontation that morning. Karen's hands had trembled, her voice had cracked, but her eyes were still filled with defiance. She hadn't run out of fear, she had run out of options. That terrified spark in her eyes told me she was already planning her next move, and I had to be ready. I returned to the house and began going through security footage from the past few months. Karen had been watching us, obsessively monitoring every detail of our property. Complaints about docks, petty fines, rumors she spread among neighbors, it was all part of a pattern. And now, after today, she had escalated to something far more dangerous. I decided I needed help, not law enforcement, though they would be involved if things escalated, but someone who understood both the legal side of property ownership and the unpredictable nature of human rage. I called an old friend, someone I trusted implicitly, who had dealt with high-conflict neighbors and volatile situations before. I explained everything: Karen's obsession, her threats, and the gun incident. Don't underestimate her, my friend warned. People like that don't stop. They escalate, and they'll do it in ways you can't predict. I nodded, absorbing every word. Deep down, I had always known Karen wasn't ordinary. Her need for control, her obsession with rules and dominance, it wasn't just HOA fanaticism, it was personal. And now that personal vendetta had collided with my property rights, my family, and my very safety. That evening, as darkness fell over the lake, I sat by the fire with my family, trying to mask the storm of thoughts in my mind. My kids played near the tree, and my spouse tried to make small talk, but I could feel the tension lingering. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, every shadow on the water reminded me that Karen was out there, somewhere, scheming her next move. And then it happened. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, staring at the screen. Something told me this was Karen. My heart pounded. I pressed answer, my voice steady but cautious. "Hello," I said. A chilling voice replied. "You think today was over? You think I'll just let you take what's mine? This isn't finished. Not by a long shot." My grip on the phone tightened. The voice was unmistakable. Karen, and the calm she pretended to have didn't hide the dangerous edge beneath. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone, a cold dread settling in my chest. I realized then that the confrontation wasn't just about property. It was about control, power, and ego. Karen had spent months, maybe years, trying to assert herself over this neighborhood. And now she had learned the hard way that I wasn't intimidated by her threats. But the danger was far from gone. Over the next few days, I increased security around the lake. Cameras, motion sensors, and even discreet alarms were installed at every vulnerable point. I made sure my family knew to stay inside when possible, and I spoke to trusted neighbors about being vigilant. Everyone could see that Karen had crossed a line, and it wasn't just a personal issue anymore, it was a potential threat. Yet, even with all precautions, I felt exposed. The lake was vast, and while I owned it, Karen could still find ways to test boundaries, to push limits. My mind replayed that morning endlessly, the gun, the fear in my children's eyes, the way she had looked at me like she had finally realized she wasn't in control. And I knew she wouldn't forget. Then came the twist I hadn't anticipated. A local news alert popped up on my phone, suspicious activity reported at lakefront neighborhood. My stomach dropped. I clicked on it, and my heart nearly stopped. Someone had called the authorities, claiming there was a dangerous confrontation involving firearms. But the caller didn't know the full story, and the story being circulated made it sound like I was the aggressor. Panic surged through me. Karen had already started spinning the narrative, framing herself as the victim, and potentially putting me in legal jeopardy. I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer, explained everything, and made sure that all security footage and evidence from the confrontation were preserved. Every word, every action mattered now, because one false step could turn this nightmare into a legal battle. That night, I stood by the lake once more. The water reflected the moonlight, calm and still, but I knew beneath that surface, chaos was waiting. Karen was out there plotting, and she wouldn't stop until she felt she had regained control. But I had one advantage: she didn't: knowledge, power, and ownership of the very ground she tried to claim. As I watched the lake, I whispered to myself, "This isn't over. Not yet. And next time I'll be ready." Little did I know, the next twist was coming faster than I could imagine. An escalation that would put everyone I loved at even greater risk and reveal a shocking secret about Karen that no one could have predicted. The days after the Christmas confrontation passed in a tense blur. My family tried to carry on as usual, but the shadow of that morning hung over us like an invisible storm cloud. Every knock on the door, every car driving slowly past the house, every crunch of snow outside our windows sent a shiver down my spine. Karen hadn't been seen since that fateful encounter, but I knew better than to believe that absence meant she was gone. I kept reviewing the security footage frame by frame, searching for any sign that she might be circling the property or testing boundaries again. My spouse kept asking if we should involve the police more directly, but I hesitated. I didn't want Karen to escalate just because I overreacted, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the threat. The gun incident was already a criminal matter, but it had to be handled carefully. One wrong step, and my Christmas nightmare could turn into a full-blown legal and emotional disaster. Then came the first real sign that Karen wasn't finished. A note left carefully on my front doorstep, wrapped in cellophane as if it were fragile evidence of her presence. I picked it up, feeling my pulse spike. The handwriting was unmistakable, tight, precise, controlling. The message was simple but chilling. "You think the day was over? You've only seen the beginning." My blood ran cold. She hadn't even bothered to hide that she was watching. Someone could have called her bluff, thought it was empty intimidation, but I knew her patterns. Karen thrived on fear and control, and now she had escalated from shouting and threats to psychological warfare. That night, I decided I needed to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just wait and let her plan her next move. I had to anticipate her, outsmart her, and protect my family. I mapped out the entire lake, every shoreline, dock, and secluded corner. I reviewed the legal documentation of my ownership, every deed, every boundary line, every easement. If this went to court, or worse, if she tried anything physical, I would be ready. But just when I thought I had some control, the next shock came. I was scanning the water one evening, lantern in hand, when I noticed a shadow moving along the far edge of the lake. At first, I thought it was a reflection or a trick of the moonlight. But then the shadow moved again, deliberately, purposefully. Someone was on my property, and it wasn't a random trespasser. It was Karen. I watched silently, hiding behind the trees, letting my initial fears settle into a strategic calm. She wasn't armed this time, at least not visibly, but her movements were deliberate. She was pacing, stopping at different docks, checking boundaries, almost as if she was memorizing every inch of what she could own. My stomach twisted. She was planning, plotting, learning my property, testing my defenses. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just a single moment of fear. This was war, a psychological, emotional, and territorial war. Karen's obsession had escalated into something dangerous and unpredictable. My family's safety wasn't just threatened by her physical presence, it was threatened by the chaos she could create, the rumors she could spread, and the fear she could instill. That night, I made a decision. I would confront her, but on my terms, not hers. I would lure her into a controlled situation where her threats would mean nothing. I had cameras, witnesses, and legal proof. I had knowledge of the lake. She didn't. And I had the calm that comes from someone who has spent years planning for unexpected confrontations. I set up motion lights along the shoreline, discreet but powerful, and prepared a safe vantage point where I could observe without being seen. I also called in a trusted friend who knew both Karen and the legal boundaries of the lake. They agreed to stay hidden nearby, ready to intervene if Karen crossed the line. The next evening, as the sun set and the lake reflected fiery orange and gold, I saw her again. Karen stepped onto the dock at the far end, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the water as if she could will it into submission. She wasn't expecting resistance, she was expecting intimidation. But the first thing she didn't account for was that this lake wasn't just a piece of land, it was mine. Every inch, every ripple, every shoreline belonged to me legally and physically. I stepped forward from the shadows, my voice calm but loud enough for her to hear. Karen, you're trespassing. Leave now, or I will have no choice but to involve the authorities. Her head snapped in my direction. Her eyes widened, a mix of rage and disbelief. She clearly hadn't expected me to confront her so directly. But instead of retreating, she raised her hands slightly, almost theatrically, as if to say, I'm not afraid. You've crossed a line, I continued. This isn't about HOA rules anymore. This is about the law, and the law is on my side. Every inch of this lake is mine. You don't belong here. For a moment, she froze, and then, in a twist I hadn't anticipated, she smiled, a thin, dangerous smile, and muttered something under her breath that made my blood run cold. We'll see about that. I realized then that Karen's obsession had become something far more sinister than petty neighborhood disputes. She was no longer just a bully or a control freak. She was a threat, and she would not stop until she found a way to get what she wanted, regardless of the consequences. That night, I stayed awake with my family, watching the lake, listening to every sound, anticipating every shadow. Karen had shifted the game entirely. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was an unpredictable force, a ticking time bomb on my property, and I knew the next confrontation would be the most dangerous yet. The lake, my sanctuary, had become a battleground, and in the stillness of the night, I whispered to myself, this ends on my terms, not hers, and whatever she tries next, she'll never take what's mine. The following days were some of the longest I had ever endured. Every creak in the house, every distant sound of boots crunching snow on the lake made my heart skip a beat. Karen had gone silent again, but silence never meant peace with her. It was a warning, a calculated pause before her next move. My family tried to resume normal life, but I could see the unease in their eyes. The memory of that gun pointed at my family haunted every corner of her home. I spent hours walking the shoreline, checking the docks, inspecting every inch of property for any sign of tampering. My mind was restless, replaying that morning over and over. How had it escalated so quickly? How had a simple neighborhood dispute turned into a threat on Christmas? And why did Karen seem almost obsessed with me? Then the twist came. While reviewing security footage late one night, I noticed something strange. Karen wasn't acting randomly. She had patterns. She had been watching us for weeks, studying the property, memorizing routines, noting who came and went. And most importantly, she seemed to be looking for something specific, something she thought was hers to claim. I leaned closer to the screen, my stomach nodding. There, in the corner of a frame I had almost overlooked, was a small marker buried near the edge of the lake. It wasn't a boundary sign, not a dock, not a common HOA marker. It was a stake, small but deliberate. And Karen had been circling it, returning to it at different times. My pulse quickened. What was she after? The next morning, I decided to investigate. I went down to the stake, careful to leave no sign I had been there. What I found shocked me. Beneath the marker was a hidden compartment, dug into the earth decades ago, now partially buried under snow and ice. Inside were old papers, maps, and what looked like legal documents. My heart raced. Could this be the source of her obsession? Had she discovered something she believed gave her a claim to the lake? I brought the documents inside and carefully examined them. The maps showed historical boundaries of the lake, property transfers, and old disputes between previous owners. It became clear that Karen had been studying these records, convinced she could challenge my ownership, convinced she could find a loophole. But she hadn't realized that the law favored me, the current documented owner. Every old claim she thought existed had been resolved years ago. Still, the revelation was chilling. Karen's obsession wasn't just personal, it was legal, historical, and deeply rooted. She believed she had a right to the lake, even though she didn't. And that belief, twisted with rage and entitlement, made her unpredictable and dangerous. Later that day, I shared my findings with my lawyer. They were equally shocked. She's not just a neighbor, they said. She's someone who has done her homework, and now she's acting on what she believes is a legal claim, even if it's completely invalid. This is serious. She could try to manipulate or threaten anyone who stands in her way. As night fell, I watched the lake again. The snow reflected the moonlight, glittering like diamonds across the frozen water. But beauty offered no comfort. I realized that Karen's obsession wasn't just about property or control, it was about proving herself right, about taking what she believed was hers by any means necessary. And then the next twist hit me like a blow. My neighbor across the street came rushing over, breathless and terrified. "You need to see this," they said. "Karen, she's talking to other people. She's spreading stories, wild danger stories, about you and the lake. She says you're trying to hide something, that there's a secret on your property she's entitled to." People are starting to believe her. I felt a surge of anger mixed with dread. Karen had escalated beyond threats. She was trying to manipulate reality, turn neighbors against us, and create chaos. My family's safety wasn't just at stake physically anymore. Our reputation, our relationships, and our sense of peace were under attack. I knew then that the battle wasn't just about standing my ground anymore. It was about strategy, intelligence, and anticipating her every move. I couldn't just react. I had a plan. I began by securing every entrance, reinforcing our property lines, and making sure all evidence of ownership was documented and visible. I contacted local authorities preemptively, explaining the situation and showing them the legal documents proving my ownership of the lake. But even with all these measures, I felt the weight of the storm coming. Karen's obsession had escalated to a level I hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just a neighbor with anger, she was someone who believed she was entitled to my family's life, my home, and the lake itself. And then came the moment I never expected. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I noticed footprints leading from the edge of the lake directly to our dock. But they weren't just Karen's, they were accompanied by signs that someone else was with her, someone helping her, someone watching and waiting. Fear surged through me, but I stayed calm. I called my trusted friend and explained the situation. "It's no longer just her," I said. "She has backup. She's recruiting or conspiring. We need to be ready." We stayed up that night, hidden, watching the lake. Hours passed, the silence broken only by the occasional crack of ice. And then, as if the night itself had been waiting for the perfect moment, Karen appeared. But she wasn't alone. A figure stepped out from the shadows behind her, someone I hadn't expected. The sight made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a neighbor dispute anymore. This was a confrontation that had the potential to destroy everything I had built, everything I loved, and everything I was willing to fight for. And in that moment, I realized the next twist would change everything. Because Karen's obsession wasn't just with the lake. It was with me, my family, and proving that she could dominate even when logic and law were against her. The night air over the lake was bitter and heavy with tension. I had barely slept in days, my mind racing with every possible scenario Karen could have been planning. The lake, once my sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield, a stage for her obsession to play out. My family tried to act normal, but I could see the strain in their eyes. They trusted me to keep them safe, and I wasn't going to let them down. Not now, not ever. I had spent hours preparing for this moment. Security cameras were positioned at every vulnerable angle, motion sensors were active, and I had a clear plan of action. But even with all these precautions, I knew there was no script for what Karen might do. She was unpredictable, unhinged, and fueled by a twisted sense of entitlement. Then I heard it, the unmistakable crunch of snow under boots approaching the dock. I peeked through the window and saw Karen, silhouetted against the moonlight, pacing and muttering to herself. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, a figure stepped forward, someone I hadn't seen before, someone who clearly had been recruited to assist her. My pulse quickened. This was bigger than I thought. I grabbed my phone and quietly called my trusted friend, whispering into the receiver, "They're here. The confrontation starts now. Stay hidden, but be ready." I took a deep breath and stepped outside, my boots crunching softly against the snow. Karen froze when she saw me, a dangerous smile spreading across her face. "I knew you'd come out," she said, her voice low and trembling with excitement. "You think this is yours, don't you? The lake, the house, everything? You're wrong. You'll see." Her accomplice stepped forward, a sneering expression, clearly trying to intimidate me. But I didn't flinch. I knew the law, I knew my rights, and I knew the full extent of what I controlled. Every inch of this lake belonged to me, and any move they made against me would have consequences. "You've crossed every line imaginable," I said calmly. "Leave now. This isn't a negotiation. This is your final warning." Karen laughed, a sharp, chilling sound that cut through the night air. "Final warning? You don't understand. This isn't about the law. This is about power. And power belongs to me." She lunged suddenly, but not at me. Instead, she tried to reach a small compartment hidden beneath the dock, the very one I had discovered days ago. She believed it contained something she could use to claim the lake. But I had anticipated this. I stepped forward, grabbing her wrist and holding her back. "Stop," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "You've already lost. Everything in that compartment is mine, and you have no claim. This ends tonight, Karen." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might retreat. But then she twisted violently, breaking free from my grasp, and shouted, "I'll never back down. I'll destroy everything if I have to." It was a dangerous moment. The tension crackled between us like lightning over the frozen lake. My mind raced. How could I de-escalate this without putting my family at risk? I knew she was unpredictable, capable of extreme actions, but I also knew the power I held. I owned the lake, and that ownership gave me control she could never imagine. In a calculated move, I slowly stepped closer to the dock, hands raised to show I wasn't threatening physically, but my eyes locked on hers, unwavering. "You can leave peacefully, Karen, or you can escalate, and I promise you, you won't like the outcome." For a moment, it seemed like she might hesitate. Then, unexpectedly, her accomplice moved aggressively toward me. I barely had time to sidestep as he lunged, trying to push me toward the edge of the dock. The ice creaked ominously beneath us, sending a jolt of fear through my body. I reacted instantly, using a combination of leverage and quick thinking to push him back. He stumbled, nearly falling into the freezing water, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Karen screamed, furious, and ran toward him, trying to pull him away. In that instant, I realized her plan was unraveling. She had underestimated the environment, the stakes, and the consequences of her obsession. I took control of the moment, stepping fully onto the dock, the moonlight reflecting off the lake behind me. "This is your last chance," I said firmly. "Leave now, or the authorities will handle this legally. You're already on record threatening my family with a weapon. One more move, and it's over for you." Karen froze, her face twisted with fury, disbelief, and a flicker of fear. She realized that her obsession, her years of plotting and scheming, had brought her to this moment, and she had no advantage. The dock, the lake, my family, and even the law were all against her. Then, in a final twist, she did something I hadn't anticipated. She dropped her accomplice's hand, stepped back, and shouted, "You think this is over? This isn't the end. You'll regret this. I'll find another way." And just like that, She turned and ran into the darkness, leaving her accomplice behind, who quickly fled after her. The ice creaked ominously as I watched them disappear into the shadows, my body tense but controlled. I took a deep breath, relief flooding through me, but also a sobering realization. This wasn't just about the lake anymore. Karen's obsession was personal. She had fixated on me and my family, and she wouldn't stop until she found a way to assert control, even if it meant breaking the law repeatedly. I returned to the house with my family, hugging my spouse and children tightly. "It's over, for now," I whispered, knowing full well that Karen's story wasn't finished. "We're safe and the lake is ours. But we need to stay vigilant. She won't give up easily." That night, I documented everything: the confrontation, the threats, the accomplice, and the hidden compartment. I contacted my lawyer and the authorities, ensuring there was a record of Karen's actions and my response. I knew that preparation, knowledge, and ownership were my only weapons against someone as relentless as her. As I finally sat by the fire, exhausted but alert, I realized something critical. Owning the lake didn't just give me power over property, it gave me power over the situation, over her obsession, and over the safety of my family. And that power, when wielded carefully, could protect us from even the most dangerous neighbor. But the lingering truth remained: Karen wasn't done, and I had to be ready for whatever twisted plan she would hatch next. The days after the confrontation felt like walking on a knife's edge. Karen had disappeared into the shadows again, but I knew better than to believe it meant she was gone. Her obsession was dangerous, unpredictable, and now fueled by her failure to take control of the lake. Every phone buzz, every car on the snow-covered road, every rustle outside our windows made my heart race. My family was tense, and so was I, but I refused to let fear control us. This was our home, our sanctuary, and we weren't going to let her take it away. I spent hours fortifying the lake's perimeter, double-checking cameras, motion sensors, and hidden alarms. I reviewed the legal documents of my ownership yet again, ensuring that everything was clear, irrefutable, and ready if Karen decided to escalate further. But even preparation could only do so much. I needed a strategy, something decisive, something that would put an end to this once and for all. It wasn't long before I discovered her plan. A neighbor, long skeptical of Karen's obsession but loyal to the truth, reported suspicious activity near the northern edge of the lake. Footprints, disturbed snow, and signs of someone digging or hiding something revealed that Karen wasn't just lurking. She was actively trying to find leverage, something she believed would give her control over the property she had no right to claim. That night, I positioned myself near the northern dock, hidden but ready. I had my phone, my friend stationed nearby, and every ounce of mental preparation I could muster. The lake was silent, the moon reflecting cold light off the ice, making the shadows seem alive. Hours passed, and just when I thought she might not appear, I saw movement. Karen emerged, cautious but determined, her eyes scanning the dock as if she was hunting for something hidden beneath it. I stepped forward, my voice calm but authoritative. "Karen, stop. Whatever you're looking for, it isn't yours. Leave now, or the authorities will handle this, and I will press charges." Her eyes flashed, fury mixed with disbelief. "You think you can stop me? I've waited too long. This is mine. You don't get to take it from me." The tension was palpable. I could see every muscle in her body tense, every flicker of emotion on her face. Anger, fear, obsession, desperation. And then she lunged toward the dock's hidden compartment. I acted instinctively, stepping in front of her, my hand firmly holding her shoulder. "You've gone too far, Karen. Step back." For a moment she froze, her eyes locking on mine, and then something astonishing happened. She laughed, a sharp, almost hysterical sound, and muttered, "You don't understand. This is bigger than you. Bigger than the lake." I realized then that Karen's obsession wasn't just about property or control. It was about ego, identity, and a personal vendetta. She believed that by taking the lake, she would somehow assert dominance, prove herself right, and humiliate me. But she hadn't accounted for one thing. I owned the lake every inch legally and physically, and I had the upper hand. With calm determination, I took control of the situation. Karen, listen carefully. You have two choices. Leave peacefully or escalate and face the consequences. Every action you take from this point will be documented. You are trespassing. You threaten my family. And you have no legal claim to this property. One more move, and it ends badly for you. Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear breaking through the rage. For the first time, I saw hesitation, uncertainty, and a recognition of her vulnerability. She had believed herself untouchable, capable of manipulating, intimidating, and controlling. But here, in the moonlight, she was exposed, powerless against the law, the property, and my resolve. Then, in a final dramatic twist, Karen's accomplice appeared again, attempting to flank her and challenge my position. But I was prepared. My friend, hidden in the shadows, stepped forward, blocking the approach, and together we created an unbreakable perimeter. The accomplice's confidence faltered, fear finally creeping in, and they backed away. Karen, seeing her plan unravel, finally faltered. I kept my voice steady, unwavering. This ends now, Karen. Leave. You have no power here. None. Not over the lake, not over me, not over my family. For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the cold wind over the lake. And then, slowly, deliberately, Karen turned and walked away, muttering curses under her breath. Her accomplice followed, leaving the dock and the lake behind. I exhaled, relief and exhaustion washing over me. The confrontation was over, but the lessons lingered. Owning the lake wasn't just about property, it was about responsibility, strategy, and protection. Karen's obsession had pushed her to the brink, but my preparation, calmness, and knowledge had kept my family safe and preserved our home. That night, I sat with my family by the fire, holding them close. It's over, I whispered. The lake is safe. We are safe. Their faces softened, relief evident, but I knew the memory of that Christmas, the terror and the confrontation would stay with us forever. And yet there was a sense of empowerment. Owning the lake had given me more than just land. It had given me control, protection, and the ability to defend what mattered most. Karen had been relentless, but knowledge, preparation, and courage had triumphed over obsession and rage. Before I end this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments, because this story shows that no matter where you are, standing your ground matters. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any future stories where I share the lessons, twists, and shocking moments that life throws our way. Remember, every confrontation teaches us something. Mine taught me that power isn't about fear or intimidation. It's about preparation, strategy, and protecting those you love. And as for Karen, well, let's just say she learned that some lines shouldn't be crossed. This Christmas, we survived. The lake remained ours, our family remained safe, and a lesson was written into the snow that even the most relentless obsession can be met with calm, courage, and unwavering resolve. Now that you've heard the full story, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the shocking, twist-filled stories I share. Remember, every moment counts, every decision matters, and standing your ground can make all the difference. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep this conversation going. Don't let anyone underestimate your strength, your knowledge, or your family's safety. Comment, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next story might be even more unbelievable than this one. You won't want to miss it.